All right, so I hope everyone is doing well after the hurricane. Today I am going to give you guys some notes on Native Americans and specifically support document 8-1.1. The way we're going to do this is you guys should have printed off by now a set of notes that are blank. You are going to fill these out as I walk you through it. This is going to be an opportunity for us to learn more about Cornell note taking as well as get the information you need for your upcoming quiz. I am at home today. It is Tuesday morning. You can see I have on my beautiful Carolina sweatshirt. Please forgive me if you hear my dogs barking in the background or whatever. But we're going to try and get through this in as short a time as possible for you guys so that you have the information that you need. So make sure that you have your notes for the video lecture out. You'll notice on the very top, I've already put in a heading for you guys with video lecture, Native American support document 8-1.1, and then I have September and a blank. You need to put in the date that you're watching this in the blank, okay? So for example, if you're watching this today on Tuesday, you would put in September 12th. You'll notice that down the left-hand side, I have left the column blank. This is your Q column. Then you'll also notice underneath, I've left the summary area blank right here because you're going to be required to go back and summarize your notes. And then you'll notice that I have several blanks through the notes section. What I am going to do is I'm actually going to give you the exact numbers of where you are putting these notes, okay? So I think it'll be evident as we go through. Now, when you printed this off, there was a set of directions that you need to make sure that you're following specifically. You're going to watch this video first. While you're watching it, you're going to complete the notes on the note sheets provided. Once you've completed the notes and you've watched the video, you're going to go through your notes again and you're going to pull out the information for your Q column. That's going to be your keywords and phrases, your vocabulary, important people or events. This is where you're also going to include any questions that you may have. This is your who is, what is, where is. This is where those questions go, things that you need more information on. You guys are also going to need your textbook. I would prefer that you have your textbook. You're going to be looking pages 4 through pages 13. That's what we're going to cover on this video. I am not going to make specific reference to the textbook, but for the assignments that come after the video, you're going to need your textbook. So you're going to watch the video, take your notes, then you're going to do your Q column, then you are going to write your summary. Okay, once you've summarized your notes, you're going to be finished with the note-taking portion. Now, when you finish up your Q column, number 4 on your directions tell you that you need to share your notes with a peer. Compare the notes, see if either one of you missed anything, see if one person got something, the other didn't, and then adapt your notes as such. Try to answer any questions that your peer has. And then you're going to go from there and summarize on the bottom. Summary, 2 sentences minimum. 2 complete sentences minimum, please. Then once you have completed that, once you have completed your notes, completed your Q column, completed your summary, and you've had a peer look at your notes and you guys have discussed your notes and compared your notes. Once you have done that, then you're going to bring the notes to your teacher and we're going to take a look at them and we're going to give you some immediate feedback and then send you on your way. So once you have completed the notes, then you're going to move into another assignment. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a 3T chart. This is a 3T chart. It's simply a chart in your ISN. Let's see if I can turn this so you guys can see it. It's a chart in your ISN where you have Cherokee, Catawba, and Yamasee, and then you've created 3 columns. 1, 2, 3. That's Cherokee, that's Catawba, that's Yamasee. You're simply going to list the characteristics. You're going to list characteristics for that tribe. characteristic for Catawba, characteristic for Cherokee, based on your notes as well as based on the pages in your textbook. Once you have listed those characteristics, then you're going to return to those characteristics and you are going to figure out with a peer what are the similarities between the tribes. So you get with your friend, your next door neighbor, whatever, and you figure out what are the characteristics that are similar. And I don't care how you identify those. Maybe if you have, if all three tribes have the exact same, you highlight those in yellow, or you circle it in red pencil, or you put a purple star beside it. It doesn't matter. But then I want you to also identify and classify with some other method, be it a different color or whatever, the things that two tribes have in common. So when you finish, you've got 3 columns filled with details about each tribe, and you can immediately see that all 3 had characteristic, number 1 in common. They all 3 use natural resource. For example, all 3 use natural resources to build their homes. Okay, that's simple. This is going to help you guys. These notes, this 3T chart, and then your vocabulary that you should have already finished. I know some of you have not, but your vocabulary, that is your quiz. That is your quiz that is coming up, quiz number 1. So, with no further ado, let's dive into the notes. If you will, take a look at page number 1. We're going to be looking at notes, video lecture, Native American support document 8-1.1, September, whatever day you're watching this video, put it in there, 2017. Now, under the note-taking column, you will see Native Americans in North America. And then the first bullet point is going to be Cahokia, founded around 700. Now, this is one of the major tribes. This is one of the major towns, if you will. Some historians call it a metropolis, that was founded in around 700. Now, we're going to go down to number 1, under Cahokia. This is a Mississippian group of Native Americans. It's a Mississippian group of Native Americans known for their mound building, and these mounds were used for burial as well as worship. In South Carolina, we had evidence that there were as many as 150 mounds at the point of European discovery and exploration in South Carolina. Today, there are roughly 34 mounds that survive. The one that's probably closest to us is around the Santee area. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of that information right there, put down under number 1, under Cahokia. Okay, stop the video, rewind it if you need to get all that information down. Now, we're going to move on to number 2. And again, one of the reasons I'm recording this video is so that you can stop and rewind the video to make sure you get what you need. Number 2, Cahokia. This was a town that is near, it was near where the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, and the Illinois rivers come together. So we have 3 rivers that converge together to create what we know as the Mississippi River that goes out into the Gulf of Mexico. This area, today we know this area is modern-day St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, Missouri. In fact, immediately across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri is the Cahokia National Park, if you will. All right, so all of that is number 2. Now, we're going to move to number 3. Again, stop, rewind, take your time. Number 3. Cahokia, in its high point, at the high point of its civilization, it had somewhere between 10,000 to 30,000 people living in it. 10,000 to 30,000 people living in it. Interesting point is that was the largest settlement in North America until roughly the 1790s. When Philadelphia and New York and Charleston ended up with more people than that. So that's pretty impressive. That's an impressive civilization. And the thing to remember is Cahokia, they were prior to European prior to European settling or showing up in North America. So that's number 3, 10,000 to 30,000 people in Cahokia at a high point. Number 4, the Cahokia, we know from evidence that they had developed trade routes all the way from what we know today as modern St. Louis, all the way from there to the Atlantic Ocean, from there to the Rocky Mountains, from there down into the Appalachian Mountains. And we know this because the artifacts, the evidence that we found through artifacts. All right, so that's number 4. Number 5, we believe, based on the evidence, that the Cahokia civilization, that they began to decline simply because there was such a large settlement that they exhausted their natural resources. That's what we know to the best of the evidence that we have out there, is that they declined because they lost or they exhausted all their natural resources. Now, interestingly, the Cahokia, the metropolis of Cahokia, it was abandoned roughly 1440-ish, so about 50 years before Columbus arrived in the New World. Cahokia was abandoned. So we have this amazing Native American civilization that grew on the banks of the Mississippi River, modern day St. Louis, Missouri. It grew from basically nothing when it was founded around 700. It became this massive civilization at its height with as many as 30,000 people. But then by the time Columbus arrived, it had diminished and fallen by the wayside, and the city was actually abandoned 50 years before Columbus ever arrived. All right, so that's number 5. Decline due to exhaustion of resources, and it was abandoned 50 years prior to Columbus's arrival in the New World. Okay, so we've just finished up all the information under Cahokia, founded around 700. Okay, we finished all the information for Cahokia, founded around 700. Stop the tape, rewind, get all your information that you need. Please make sure you have this information. I'm putting it on video so you have it. Now, we're going to move on to the bullet point label, divided into regional groups based on. All right, so again, we're talking about Native Americans in North America. So what historians and anthropologists have done throughout time is they have decided we need a good way to divide these groups up, because they were individual tribes and groups of people. So there are two basic ways that they're divided. Number 1, by geography. In other words, this is under number 6. Geography, where did they live? And also by the language that they spoke. So the two ways that we divide Native Americans up when we're speaking of them historically is by geography, where did they live, and then also by the language spoken. That's number 6. Number 7, one of the things that we need to remember is that the first natives that Europeans encountered were known as the Eastern Woodland Indians. The Eastern Woodland Indians. Those were the first Native Americans that were encountered in North America, in what we know today as the United States, by the Europeans. Now, so that's number 6 and 7. We're going to move on to number 8, which is under Eastern Woodland Indians. Now, we said earlier that the two ways that we determine how we're going to classify Native Americans is by geography and the languages spoken. So the Eastern Woodland Indians, we primarily classify those by geography because there are a multitude of languages spoken by them. However, what the geographical region that we use to classify Eastern Woodlands Indians is basically the area between the Mississippi River and the Atlantic Ocean. If a Native American lived in that area, they are classified as, quote, Eastern Woodland Indians. And the reason is because of the geography. It was a dense, incredibly lush forest. All right, so that's going to be number 8. Eastern Woodland Indians, they live between the Mississippi River and the Atlantic Ocean. Number 9, What are some characteristics of them? Typically speaking, Eastern Woodland Indians, Native Americans, they farmed and they lived in permanent villages. This is number 9. They farmed and lived in permanent villages. But they did not have a sense or thought that they could privately own land. In other words, Joe, Native American, did not believe he could own the plot of land he was farming. The entire tribe or the entire community owned the land. That becomes very important when we start looking at conflict between Native Americans and Europeans later. Okay, number 10. The Eastern Woodland Indians, they generally used natural resources for housing, clothing, tools, and other needs. Generally used natural resources for housing, clothing, tools, and other needs. Examples: rocks, animal pelts for clothing, saplings, grasses, tree bark, all of those things, all of those natural resources, okay, things that are naturally occurring in nature, were used by the Native Americans to meet their needs, okay. They used rivers for transportation. This was the primary method of transportation among these guys. That's number 11. Number 12, they developed slash and burn agriculture. This is one of your vocabulary words. Slash and burn agriculture simply means that when they needed a piece of land in order to farm, they would cut down all the trees and then they would burn the brush. They would burn the underbrush. And that was the way that they went about clearing an area to farm. That was their modern day logging, if you will. Number 13, their primary crops. The primary crops of the Eastern Woodland Indians was corn, pole beans, and squash. Now, this is known as Three Sisters farming. And the reason it's known as Three Sisters farming is because all 3 crops were grown on the exact same piece of land. Now, what does that mean? We would plant a row of corn, then we would plant the pole beans right beside the corn. They're called pole beans because they climb poles. So your beans would begin to sprout and they would actually wrap themselves around the corn stalk because it's a vine. It needs to grow up in order to produce the fruit, which is the actual bean that you eat. So we've got a stalk of corn, we've got beans growing up it, and then beside the beans, we've got the squash. Now, interestingly, the Native Americans discovered that these 3 crops could grow together and they would mutually benefit each other. Okay, now, so that's Three Sisters farming. The Native Americans also grew a form of tobacco. So that's an interesting point there for number 13. Okay, so we finished up this section on Native Americans, North America, Eastern Woodland Indians. Now we need to move on to the second sheet of our notes. We're going to be looking specifically at the Cherokee, the Catawba, and the Yamasee. Again, please stop the tape, pause, back up, rewind, do what you need to do. Okay, if you do not finish this in class, you need to do it at home because your quiz is going to be this week. So let's move on to Cherokee.